It's the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast, where we talk about all things consensual non-monogamy, polyamory, open relationships, swinging, and how you can have secure and sexy relationships, no matter how you do them. Now here's your hosts, Tara and Andre.
Hello, everyone. Please say hello in the chat if you like. Tell us where you're from. Tell us how excited you are to talk about jealousy. Anything you'd like. In the stream. Oh, there we are.
In the stream.
In the stream. Like islands in the stream.
No, I was thinking more like, pregnancy test.
Oh, that kind of stream. That's not our topic for today.
No, being in a golden shower stream? No, not our topic today.
All right. Our topic today is jealousy. So today's brought to you by the letter J, jealousy.
Jealousy. Who wants to talk about jealousy?
Usually nobody does, although we all experience it. So I think we have talked about it a couple times, but it is a big thing. Yeah. It is the thing that people struggle with most in their relationships, especially non-monogamous ones.
Well, no, I don't know about that. People in monogamy, they've got some jealousy issues as well. But, we might not want to necessarily talk about jealousy, but it's kind of like going to the dentist, right? You might not want to go to the dentist, but it's actually good for you, right? Because it has prevented many other things, and it's just part of oral care. And same thing with jealousy, right? Monogamy, open relating, polyamory, whatever it is, there will be opportunities to come across jealousy in your life, whether you want them or not. But how will you deal with them? How will you be affected by them? And how can you affect them? So we'll talk a little bit about that today.
Exactly. I'm adjusting the mic because I know now you can see it. I guess it doesn't matter.
It's your big mic.
Because sometimes I'm a little louder and I feel like I'm closer to it. Maybe I should sit back. So we are going to just touch on what jealousy is today and some things you can do right now to impact your jealousy, if you're monogamous or non-monogamous. But feelings.
I was thinking back the other day about my relationship where I came from with my mother in this thought, how free she was of her own position and how that allowed me to be free and who I am. That it was really, all things are normalized. It was just, well, if you feel this way, that's fine. And if you don't feel the way, that's okay too. We were able to really be very self-accepting, self-expressive. And that really helped to allow me to be a sex-positive therapist and hopefully convey that same impression that, whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, it falls someplace on the human spectrum of sexuality. And it is quite okay. If there are things that you find to be uncomfortable, disruptive, whatever, we can look at that and find ways to address that so there's less discomfort. And that's kind of where we're going today with jealousy, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has it to some degree. Some people seem as though they are very affected by it, and less people seem much less affected by it. How can we move into that camp of being less affected by it? What can we do?
Right. So would you say that you're in the camp of more jealous or less jealous, or has that shifted over time?
Oh, great question. Yeah, I think I'm in the camp now of being less affected, and it's definitely shifted over time. But even, I think a lot of it depends on where you're at, but also the partner you're with. But even in our relationship, I think, I've made a big movement. At one point, I know one incident for sure where I was extremely jealous and was not feeling as though I was well equipped. And then I was able to look at these things, implement some of the things we're going to talk about. And there's been definitely a shift into a much more comfortable position with my feelings and my feelings around that thing we call jealousy, which is a bundle of feelings, right?
Yeah. For myself, I would have said prior to our relationship that I was a pretty jealous person, but done a lot of work, like in both the work we're doing here and researching and practicing, but also, like you said, having a good partner that you can communicate with has been a big shift for me. So we want you all to have that shift as well. So we're going to give you a few things that you can do, but let's start with what is jealousy? I think you sort of hinted at it a bit.
Well, yeah, that's a good thing, right? Because we might say, oh, I'm feeling jealous, but what are we feeling when we say we feel jealous? So it's thought that jealousy is a umbrella term. It's a catch-all for a bunch of different components, a bunch of different feelings or thoughts that are going on simultaneously. And it's nice to just wrap it up in a bow and say, well, I'm feeling jealous. But what's at play? What is creating that? So can you tell us a little bit about
Sure. So I'd say the big ones are insecurity and uncertainty are big feelings that I think cause us to have that sense of being jealous.
Right.
There's also fears. So there's a bunch of fears that could fall
yes.
into it that are underlying. These are the things that are really underlying
Right.
our jealousy. So fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of the unknown. So that kind of goes with the uncertainty.
Right. Exactly.
Fear that the absolute worst thing that we could ever imagine would happen. That's a one.
Right. That's a calamity, right? We think that we're catastrophizing.
Catastrophizing, yeah. Fear of being left out. So FOMO.
Yeah.
It can be even lack of safety. The big one I hear from clients is a feeling of not being enough. So that's the underlying feeling. Envy, competition, or territoriality.
Yeah, competition and territoriality. That's very interesting, right? We feel like what we perceive to be ours is somehow going to be taken from us. Right?
Or that we have to compete to keep it.
Right. Yeah, there's some threat that's going to somehow separate us from that.
So often when we're feeling jealous, there can be negative behaviors associated with it, like possessiveness or dependence. Sometimes I think people, when they feel jealous, they want to cling tighter rather than allow space. And I think it doesn't,
Yeah, it's so unfortunate because it actually acts counter, right? When we're jealous and we want to hold on more, it inevitably, almost always, makes the other person want to put distance. And that only makes us feel even more disconnected, right? So how do we combat that? How can we reassure ourselves and say, well, I don't have to grab holder, that's tighter hold. That's not actually going to culminate in what I'm wanting. How can we find a way to self-soothe in a sense and then re-invite the person to come back?
Exactly. Well, that's a good segue. I was going to say, though, too, that also there's sometimes issues around trust and respect that are underlying as well. Those are big ones.
The trust and respect. So the question is then, is it specific to the partner and the circumstance that you're having in the immediate, or are these things that are archaic? Are they part of your repetition? Are they part of your history that you might have experienced in the past? And then do you carry that forward? And now are you mistrusting of all of those people, right?
Yeah.
So you had an incident with somebody who's blue, and now all blue people are going to be setting you off, or red, green, and yellow. So how much of it is historic and how much of it is actually, I guess, in a sense, almost valid, that is specific to the circumstance that's going on?
I think the interesting thing about jealousy is that it alerts us to something that's going on. So it's internal, or so it could be something like you said, that's a repetition, but it also could be alerting us to something that's true that we may not want to believe. And so there's both sides of it. So
but you're right. It's alerting us to something. And, unfortunately, what happens as an organism, when we feel some level of discomfort, we want to move away from that. And that's fine. We get out from the danger of the flame, but we're not looking at what was causing that flame, what was causing that reaction. So if we simply move from it, are we then prone to experience it over and over again, as opposed to having that willingness to tolerate some of those feelings of discomfort long enough to examine what's at play? How can we have another position or better understanding of it so we might feel less affected by it?
Awesome. So that's an even better segue into, here's some seven things that you can do to take a look at your jealousy, address and take a look at it. Okay, so the first one you already alluded to, which was starting with introspection. So where are these feelings coming from?
Right. And again, it goes back to, what are these feelings? I'm feeling jealous, but what is that jealous feeling made up of? What is the trigger in that? What are the components that are there? Because if we're able to kind of unpack them, dissect them, then we can address each one of those and find ways of having a different position towards it.
Right. So some of it is insecurities, like we talked about, self-esteem, self-doubts. You're feeling you're comparing yourself to others. So looking at where they're coming from. So that's number one.
So are we going to speak a little bit about what we might do? So if it is like a question of self-esteem, how we might address that?
Yes.
Do we have a chance to look at that?
Yeah, some of them are in there, but did you want to say something about it?
Well, if we're going to do it later on, we can.
Well, it's sort of embedded in each of them. So part of what you can do is figure out what it is. So number one is figuring out where it's coming from, right? And so I think one of the things that we had listed was remembering all the things, positive things that you bring to the relationship, and all things your partners say about you. But I think that we covered that a little bit later on too. So yeah,
let's go to it.
So looking at where they're coming from, and then the second one is looking at the ways that jealousy is negatively affecting you. Yeah.
So when it's negative affecting you? Isn't that kind of obvious? You are just feeling that position. What more can you say about that?
I think it's being more being curious about what's going on when you're feeling jealous. So how is that playing out for you? So are you obsessing around your partner, maybe texting another partner, or
right. So that's an interesting point. So that obsessing, right? So there's that feeling of jealousy, and all of a sudden we give it the fuel it needs to really take off, and we start becoming obsessed, becoming so invested in that idea, and then we start finding, as you would say, that negative evidence, right, to support these feelings, and it may not be entirely accurate or fair. We might only be loading up the side with the negative evidence and not really giving consideration to the positive parts, right? The parts that might be able to balance that.
Yeah. And there's a bit of a debate in this, is that, about reassurance. So sometimes people feel that you shouldn't have to seek reassurance from partners. There's lots of schools of thought on that. Like, it isn't your partner's job to fix the problem for you or to offer you reassurance. But while I agree that no one person can fix what's inside of you, you have to do your own work. We can ask for things that help support that, as long as they're healthy things and not, we don't get into rules-based things where you can't date someone with green hair because they have green hair. I don't know. I'm just giving an example of something that people sometimes set up rules to protect themselves.
So we're wanting to get some type of security, reassurance, soothing from our partners, but we shouldn't use that as the go-to. That's all. So we're not wanting the other person to be our savior, right?
Exactly.
So they might be supportive and empathetic, they might be reassuring, but that almost comes as like a secondary thing, right? We have to first be able to come to this appreciation, this understanding on our own. Otherwise, we won't even be open to it.
Exactly.
Because, what might happen is our partner or partners might try to reassure us, and if we've already built the case against it, then we'll simply think that they are offering us lip service, as opposed to really being open to what it is that they're saying.
Yeah, it's about believing. That's the thing. Like, I talk to people all the time, and couples in particular. One person will say, I've told them a million times that I love them and that I'm here for them and all that. And it's like, yeah, but they don't believe you. Right. So there's something in themselves that is causing them not to believe that thing. So what is it that they might believe? For example, the example, I talked to a couple recently, and they wanted just for their partner to send them a quick text when they were out, because they traveled a distance to see their partner, and all they wanted was a quick text saying, hey, I'm thinking about you. And, for them, that would have made, there were still other things, but for them, that one small thing consistently done would make a big, huge difference for them.
So that little gesture, that little way of checking in would reassure them.
Yeah. It was one way of reassuring them. I think there's other things, and there's farther they need to go, but that was one thing that they mentioned, and they had asked for it, but the other person did it very inconsistently, and they didn't understand why that was so important. Consistency.
Well, that's so that kind of goes back to the earlier part of our object relations, right? And do we have secure, insecure attachment? So if we get a message that's inconsistent and we are already feeling insecure, that might only add to that feeling of insecurity, because it's sometimes here, sometimes not here. Whereas when we are feeling secure, when we already have secure attachment, if the message is inconsistent, well, we know even if they don't check in, we're still okay. So we want to look at the earlier forms of attachment, secure attachment. And if we don't have that, how might we develop that? We're not able to go into that right now, but there are ways of addressing that for sure.
Exactly.
In that we are.
Okay. So number 3, setting realistic expectations for your relationship. That's an interesting one.
Yeah. Realistic expectations. What might that mean?
Well, it's around how, not people try to control their partner's thoughts and actions, but that's not really healthy or realistic for them. So
they control their thoughts or actions?
People feel like they should be able to, like for someone, seeing a partner flirt with somebody else, like you can control them doing that, or taking a second look at something that's attractive. And I think it's different too if you're in a monogamous versus a non-monogamous relationship, because we had that quick chat before we went on about, is flirting okay if you're in a consensually non-monogamous relationship? Actually, I'm interested. I'm just curious what people think about that.
Right. Yeah. Because in monogamy, I guess you would say, well, it's definitely not okay to be kissing somebody, for example, right? Whereas in an open relating relationship, you might come across or might be even part of a scenario where you are going to see your partner or partners kissing somebody else, and how will you be able to affect it?
But then is it different, for example, if you're on a date and maybe you have an agreement that when you're on a date with your one partner, that you don't outwardly seek others or, outwardly flirt or that sort of thing.
So then does it come down to a question of consideration?
Yeah, consideration and respect. But, when we go out, I'm like totally open to it. But I think because we've been together a long time, I feel secure in our relationship. And I don't think you would do something that's inconsiderate or disrespectful.
What if I did? I did unknowingly. So it's not my intention, but I do it. How do you?
Because you're so cute and flirtatious.
Because I'm so cute and flirtatious. So I might do something that I think is okay, but somehow it's not so much so. How do you address that? How do you bring it up?
I don't know. Let's ask the people. What do you think we're going to say? Somebody out there. Communicate. So you might say, well, when you did, or when this happened, I felt this way and it made me feel this way, right? Yes.
So what did I do?
The I statement.
The I and the me, right? So it seems
the I and the me.
Everybody knows
when this
it,
occurred,
right?
When this and factual statement occurred, I felt X.
Right.
And then if you have a solution, you could say it would be helpful for me if this would happen.
Right. So it might sound basic, and to those who know, they already know it. But if you haven't heard this before, it is the basis of our platform we're going to jump off of. So what we're doing in that is we're speaking from the I, from me. It makes me feel this way. Because when we say, well, when you did this, all of a sudden it can be received as being accusatory. And then our ego right away goes into the defensive stance.
Yes.
And very often the best defense is a strong offense. So we become offensive. And we're like, well, you did that and did that. And all of a sudden it becomes name calling or whatever, or tit for tat. And the primary issue goes into the ether. It's just never really addressed. And now it becomes something entirely different. What happens in the other way of saying I or me, we are informing the other person of our thoughts, our feelings, our position, and then
we own our feelings.
And we see how they are going to respond. Hopefully we're with a partner who is caring, loving, and generous and considerate and would appreciate that. And if they're not, well, then that might alert us to what's putting us in a relationship where we're not with somebody who is wanting our best, right? As we said from the beginning, a healthy relationship is built on trust and respect.
Yes.
And consideration.
Yeah.
So, something to say there.
Something to say there.
Unless, of course, you're wanting to be humiliated, but you should be then doing that in consent.
In consent. Okay. So we already jumped into it, but number 4 is communication, being open and honest with your partners about your feelings.
Right.
So jealousy, as we know, can be an internal battle. So communicating with your partners, as you said.
Sometimes in the heat of the moment, when we're feeling jealous, we're feeling perhaps too insecure to communicate that. Or we might even be feeling rage, right? We might feel so angered by it. So sometimes it is best to pause and just give a moment, look at where it's coming from, what's actually going on, what do we know are the facts, and what are simply our impressions or our insecurities or feelings about that.
Exactly. You kind of end up going back to number 1 with introspection. And I think that's where I've gotten better in my time. I still get jealous from time to time. It's like, what is it about it?
But it's interesting because you might get triggered and feel that what we call the feeling of jealousy, and then you look introspectively and like, well, what was making me feel jealous about that? And then I come to realize, well, I felt jealous because I thought that they were having such a great time with this other person. They might not want to be with me anymore. They don't see me as and then all of a sudden we create this narrative, this scenario for ourselves. And all we do is we find the negative evidence to support that, as opposed to looking back and saying, well, wait a second, my partner is with me because they found me intelligent, attractive, whatever the initial offerings were. What evidence do I have to say that those things are now no longer of value or they're invalid? The only evidence is what I've been putting in my mind, thinking that it's not that way. And as my mother so wisely pointed out, if you do come to find out that the other person is changed and not wanting, isn't it better to know now ahead of time so that you might be able to be in a better position, so you're not wasting your time either? Right?
Exactly.
It sounds a little bit harsh, but it's absolutely true. And it kind of goes back to the idea of one of the things we can do to offset jealousy is working on our own level of self-esteem. And by building up our own self-esteem, if it should, the relationship should come to pass, we will have felt better about ourselves. We'll be in a better position to go forward into the future.
Yeah. Well, I think we talked about this before, is that, some earlier, sometimes jealousy is an actual warning to us. Like our feelings are true and we're being alerted to something.
Mhm.
I always love, and I bring this up all the time. I went to this Oprah event, saw her live at an
Yeah,
event.
wow.
My friend took me because I was in a really not a good place in my life. And then I
Mhm.
wrote copious notes on this.
Mhm.
But one of the things she said was that people reveal who they are to us. We just have to pay attention to it. So sometimes those feelings are really true and we have to trust it.
Right.
But it is good to figure out if it is something internal. 'Cause for myself, I think it all comes back to, I still think I'm that not cool kid in high school and grade school. That's where mine comes back to, is like, oh, somebody's cooler than me, and thus my partner is going to like them better than me.
Right.
Obviously.
Fantastic, though, that you're able to identify where those feelings were come from,
Oh, man.
and how you've been able to transfer those feelings of inadequacy from the past into these new relationships. How you're able to see, well, that's not anything to do necessarily with this relationship. It's the baggage I'm bringing forward.
Mm-hmm.
However, that being said, sometimes you might be with people who are eliciting those feelings, and then your intuition tells you, well, wait a second, this is familiar to me, and I remember this, and that's where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how am I going to deal with it? Am I
Mhm.
going to subscribe to this idea that I'm inadequate, that I'm not good enough? Or am I going to be able to look at the present evidence and say, no, I am valid and I am good just the way I am, and I don't have to revert back to these archaic feelings?
Exactly. So that's a good segue into number 5.
It's like segue
Which
day.
is, it's segue day. I gotta stop saying segue. Is number 5 being practicing gratitude and creating your positive stacks. So we
Mhm.
talked a bit about the negative stacks we create,
Right.
but like learning appreciation and gratitude on the positives in your
Mhm.
relationship, like you
Mhm.
said, like think about what your partners do for you and
Right.
what you do for them, and what they are and what they're not.
But also in that, I'd like to add, what about, it's great to know what our partners do, but what about for ourselves,
Mhm.
right? Can we remind ourselves of our greatness? Where can we
Yeah.
witness how fantastic we are at whatever it is that we do?
Yeah. Well, that's why some people like to journal things like that, like
Mhm.
writing, all the things you appreciate about yourself. I know I created an exercise for one of my clients once about the appreciation and love list.
Oh,
And they had to write, and they had a really hard time with it because
Mhm.
sometimes it's hard to write what we love and appreciate about ourselves. So one of the questions is like, what would other people say about you?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about that is sometimes we don't believe it.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
and how do you go about believing it? How come we're all of a sudden like really bright?
I don't know.
It's so interesting.
The sun. But what's interesting though? You ask them to write down those things, and maybe it's a short list and they have a difficult time doing it. But I wonder if you ask them to write down all the negative things about themselves, how long that
Oh,
list would
yeah.
be and how much they would actually believe that. But what evidence they have to support that other than their feelings, right? So maybe they write those negative things, but then can you ask them to counter that?
Yes.
How
And
they
finding
might be
well, that's where I say finding the evidence to support the thing that you want, right? And what you have.
Right. So then, when they're not able to necessarily make that longer list with those other things, it might be an indication of their having low self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we build our self-esteem?
Well, how do we do that?
By
doing esteemable acts, right?
Right. So doing things that might make us feel good about ourselves. Everything from making our bed in the morning to saving money, thinking that we're worth something. Symbolically, it says that there's a future for us. Hanging out with friends, hanging out with loved ones, or getting outside of ourselves, doing something for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There are many ways that we can raise our estimation of ourselves, our self-esteem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the thing I'm working on still is like believing what people say about us too. Like I went to a party on Saturday for a friend's birthday. It was a super fun like dress up party, and I don't know how many people told me that I was like super beautiful, like I was beautiful and sexy, and I looked great. And I was like looking at myself, going, "Yeah, I look okay," but like, oh, I don't like this role or this thing or that thing. And then it comes back to like, that whole like not the cool kid thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know me from birth to now, and other people don't have that same experience of you, and that they just see you in the now and they believe the now. So we have to believe the now too.
Yeah, I think it's important that we be able to identify the voices that strengthen us and the voices that weaken us, right? And the voices that weaken us, do we have to hang on to them? Can we let go of them and accept that we are fantastic as we are today? And for many people, that is a very difficult thing, unfortunately. But we identify when we're hearing a negative voice, and we simply then put it to the side and immediately replace it with whatever would counter that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, I feel that, Tara.
Yeah.
I have the same feelings of inadequacy from my childhood. Yes.
Don't we all?
Oh, somebody wrote, Carolyn Franco, you were so cool. I can't see who that is, but thank you. I'll have to look at it after. Such flirt in general. Thankfully, my husband knows this and accepts this as part of who I am. Kissing someone in front of him, that will be part of the discussion for our non-monogamy journey. Oh, how exciting.
So very good. Part of the discussion. Can we have that discussion beforehand? Let's talk about what we imagine it might be like, both in the nightmare and the fantasy versions, right? But talking about it beforehand, how do you imagine it might be if I were to do this? What would it be like for you to see me doing this? All those things. Let's talk about it before we go into action. There'll be lots of time for action.
Yes.
But if we feel secure in it, we're more likely to have a positive experience of it, as opposed to it just happening. And then how do we undo, all those things? It takes more work. So let's talk about it before. Communication, communication.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, one of our earlier lives we did was on like what the steps to take before your very first date in non-monogamy.
Sure.
And that was a really good one because one of them was talk about what you imagine it's going to be like and what sorts of actions you might take and not take. Although one of my partners always jokes and says, you can't unsee your wife having sex with someone else in front of you the first time. Like it's interesting. It's going to happen. Yeah. You prepare for it, but it's still, sometimes you don't know exactly how you're going to feel in that moment.
You might not know it entirely, but if you've gone into it with eyes open from a secure place, it's a much different experience of seeing that first time than if you just kind of stumble into it, right? So the idea of opening up a relationship, many people have been wanting to do this for a while, whatever, and they are hyped on it, right? They are getting that new relationship energy and the thought of it. And it's like, wow, let's go to it. And they want to jump into it. And they're not quite as prepared for what they did not know. And we're asking you to try and project yourself into it without actually doing it, that we might talk about it, we articulate before we demonstrate. So that we might be able to be better informed. What's going to come up? What's going to happen when I do actually see that? Have I stopped to really consider it? And let's talk about how we might feel more secure in that.
I actually enjoy watching you have sex with other people. It's exciting for me now. It's hard to believe that I'm saying that, but I've come to a place and done so much work that it is comfortable. It can be comfortable for me. And I know that you always, what I love about our relationship and about non-monogamy in general, if you have a healthy non-monogamous relationship, is that if you have a nesting partner or some anchor partner, someone that you see more than others, that they constantly return to you.
Right.
Like, that feels good. For me, it's ongoing reassurance. Okay. So you covered number 6, focus on the good versus the bad and let go of the negative future focus. Oh, we didn't talk about that. Negative, like projecting into the future, a negative future that something bad's going to happen. And then number 7, talk it out with a friend or a professional.
I think so much of that is not really acknowledged as to how and why that's beneficial. So it's what Freud had called the talking cure, right? When we talk about things from a physiological standpoint, we're creating neural pathways of discharge. But what's happening really is we are hearing our own narrative.
Repeat that again. Neural
pathways of discharge.
Okay, cool.
So I feel a certain way, anger, hurt, whatever, and I talk about it, and I'm actually influencing my brain chemistry, and I'm making ways to discharge it. So it's easier to let go of these feelings that are troublesome. But I think one of the most fantastic keys to talking about it is that we get to hear our own narrative. We get to hear our own crazy, and we might hear ourselves like, yeah, it's insane that I'm so, driven or so obsessed with having to check their every moment of being. And we can kind of have it as a sounding board to hear, well, does it really sound quite right? And being able to talk about it, we can hear that. But also being able to talk about it with a trained professional or a trusted friend, they might also offer us an alternative. They might be able to alert us to blind spots that we have, or help us to look at things in a different perspective and to reevaluate it. So we are not simply catastrophizing or thinking in black and white terms.
Yeah, it offers a different perspective, but it also, like a professional, will ask you questions that maybe you might not ask yourself, and they will dig and dig and dig a little more.
Right.
And I don't know about you, but I love when I'm working with clients and we're asking questions and talking and that sort of thing. And then they get this aha moment, like they're like, oh yeah, that, I didn't think about that.
Right.
And, talking with a friend is also great too, but choose your friend wisely.
Well, the thing about talking to friends and family, as wonderful as it is, they have their own agenda, right?
Mhm.
They want what they believe is the best for us.
Mhm.
Whereas when you're speaking to a trained professional, they are much more neutral about it and can be more objective about it. But then when they do offer something, we can really know that it's not as though they're simply being empathetic towards us, that they might be the voice of reason, a little bit more sound in that aspect.
Yeah, I think one of the first things I tell people when they start working with me is that I'm going to ask them tough questions, and I hope you will answer them. It has a reason for it. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I'm trying to help get to the thing that you want, right?
I was going to make a snide comment.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say you're only trying to be difficult with your partner, not with them.
That's not true.
Well, no, but maybe I like that. It's kind of fun sometimes.
Oh, okay. So we're getting to the end. So,
Yes.
But I think, the main point of this is, working with somebody is working through our feelings of jealousy and insecurity are a great opportunity for growth. We've both experienced it, and there's an opportunity for you as well. So rather than pushing them aside, bringing them kind of closer to you and understanding and being curious and non-judgmental. I think that's the other thing about it.
Of others and of self.
Yes, of yourself and having the feelings. There's sometimes people are like going, oh, I shouldn't be jealous. Like, why am I jealous? And then they get mad at themselves for being jealous. And then they're so mad at themselves, they can't deal with the jealousy feelings.
Yeah, exactly.
It completely, and then that derails it as well. So.
Right. So see if you're able to suspend the self-judgment. Yeah, that's good advice.
But I think working through them, what happens is, you're not going to prevent jealousy completely. For us, it still pops up from time to time, but you're going to be better positioned to deal with it.
Yeah.
Like, I think my moments of jealousy are a little more fleeting now.
Right. And when you feel as though you are a better position to do it, you feel more empowered. And when you feel more empowered, you feel more secure.
Yeah. And I know we're saying all these things. They seem pretty simple, but to people who are new to consensual non-monogamy, jealousy is the thing kind of that comes up. And that's often the most difficult because we have these learnings around monogamy, and it's a little more challenging to unlearn them sometimes if they're super ingrained, especially if there's been some sort of religious background or something like that that's teaching you that what you're doing is wrong or disgusting or immoral.
Right. But
which I've been told for people who don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Verbatim.
But
you're absolutely right. Initially, it might seem overwhelming because we've not yet learned that language. We've not yet learned the skills on how to deal with it. But they are learnable. We can teach you how to do that. And you are able to move past it into a more secure position where you are less affected by jealousy. And that is true for all people.
I'm just reading a comment. You seem to be time traveling as a cue for me.
That's what their partner says, yes. So their partner,
I see. Yeah.
when they are catastrophizing, when they're going forward like that, their partner might remind them. And I think it's a beautiful, gentle way of inviting them back to the moment so that we're not, because when we catastrophize, when we project in the future, it's not very often very balanced, right?
No.
We're seeing it one way and we're creating that scenario to really support that feeling. But it is a disservice to ourselves because we don't know how the future is going to be. We don't know all these things, and we're not. It's generally very biased. It's one way, and we want to come back to it.
Yeah, I think even when you're starting relationships, sometimes people future,
for sure,
time travel, and they project something, or they feel they have to know what's going to happen or exactly how it's going to work out.
Yeah, and actually, I hear myself say that people might project all the best things and not be realistic in their expectations either, right? They might think, oh, this is going to be the end all relationship and it's going to be, perfectly fantastic, which it could be, but are we being balanced in our thinking? So let's be aware of that as well.
Exactly. So those are all the things. We covered them quite quickly. That's awesome. Jealousy.
Done.
All right. There goes the tie. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Are you feeling stuck in your relationship and ready for expert support and a proven system that works? We are super excited to announce that we'll be running a new cohort of our Polyamory Mastery group coaching program and would love for you to join us. This is our deeper dive group coaching experience for people who are looking for real transformation and support that actually makes a difference in creating secure, satisfying, and sexy non-monogamous relationships. In this course, you'll get 8+ in-depth modules of training with brand new content, all of which will be recorded and added to our course site, downloadable tools and exercise to apply your knowledge and work on your unique relationship, and of course, live coaching with Andre and Tara. Whether you're new to non-monogamy, years in and still hitting roadblocks, or want your relationships to really thrive, this program is for you. Check out the show notes for information on the program and how to apply. Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast with T&A. Don't forget to subscribe and give us some love on your favorite podcasting platform. All the links to the things we talked about today are in the show notes.